Now that we have learned that how the print revolution it came about in Europe, what were the different impacts of the print revolution, in this part of the chapter we'll be learning about the reading mania. Means till now we have seen that literacy rate of Europe in the 15th century and in the 16th century was not so high. So there was a mixture of oral and print culture in there was a mixture of oral plus print technique of relaying knowledge that was there on the go when Gutenberg's printing press it spread all over Europe. Okay, but with the passing time and with you can say in the 17th century, in the 18th later part of the 17th century, 18th century, the literacy rate it started to rise because more and more books flourished, more and more books came about in the market. So the price of the books it was reduced, and that enabled very cheaper some cheaper markets to crop up where small books, okay, and small books printed where letters they were words they were printed on very cheap quality of paper, they started erupting up. That enabled or that encouraged the lower sections of the society and also women who were not allowed to read, that is the lower class women, it encouraged them also to get involved or get inculcated into the reading sections of the society, hence the concept name the reading mania. New forms of popular literature appeared in print targeting new audiences. Some sorts of popular literature we have already had a view at. We had looked upon ballads, all right, and we had looked upon folklores. So this was done to lure people so that people could start reading books even though they were not so literate. Okay, and when the literacy rate started increasing slowly and slowly, and when people started buying more and more books gradually, okay, then new and newer forms of printing ideas they started cropping up. So posters, okay, articles, journals, newspapers, calendars such as almanacs. Almanacs are those calendars where astronomical data have been printed, right? So you know that on those calendars there are certain dates where this planet is heavy, or where you have to be beware of this planet. Okay, so these sort of astronomical data which could lure people, all right, which could lure a new section of the society that were more and more keen towards the printing area. Okay, ballads and folk tales as we have already seen, and this is a bibliothèque bleue. This is a French technique, or you can say this is a French book. Okay, these are French books and they were printed on low quality papers, plus the covers of those books they were blue in nature. Okay, so they were small. One of the qualities of these books that they were very small, plus the cover of those books they were blue in color, and they were printed on very low quality paper, so hence they were very cheap. Okay, so this is a French book, Bibliothèque Bleue. So books of these fashions they started cropping up, and you can see here in this picture that this woman is reading from a very small book. This book is also known as pocket books. All right. So all those people who were exposed to the reading section, now they had numerous options to choose from. They had newspapers, they had articles, they had these fictions options of ballads, folklores, all right, and they had more and more cheaper varieties of books that were flourishing in the market. Okay, this pocket books is also of one such variety. Plus, there were certain type of literature. I mean, certain books were catering towards certain literature. Okay, so the book that this woman is reading here, this could be one of you can say the conduct code or the conduct literature. By this I mean that since women they were supposed to be they were considered, they are still considered somewhere or the other submissive to men, right? Owing to the egregious patriarchal domination or patriarchal thinking, right? So in those times, in the 17th century, in the 18th century, in those times, women were more and more subjugated, and only fewer sections of the women were exposed to reading. Okay, lower class women they started reading only when books like all these popular literature books they started flourishing. Okay, so special kind of literature you can say was dedicated to women, and these were the conduct code literatures where it was written that these are the codes of behavior that women should follow. Means these are the codes of behavior that women should develop, should inculcate when they are living in their household or when they are going out. This is the way they should perform when they move out. This is the kind of clothes they should wear. This is the kind of mannerisms they should equip, the kind of etiquettes they should equip. Okay, so all of these digressive ideas, they were now also being there circulated via the print culture. Okay, then books as a means of spreading enlightenment. Now that you have seen that books were causing a havoc, you can say, right? Because like I had explained you while discussing the Martin Luther part, that varying arguments, or you can say different logic, all right, this was now more accepted. Okay, so if I am saying one thing and you're not agreeing with me, you might have your own logic, you might have your own thinking. Okay, but earlier you were not able to express yourself because there was no means of expression. But now via pamphlets, via books, you can write whatever you want. Okay, and you can express that, oh, this is these are the ideologies of the Catholic Church, but I don't agree with them because they are regressive, because they are orthodox. Okay, so all these lines of arguments, so varying arguments, logical thinking. Okay, thinking, thoughts, and what kind of thought, what kind of thinking? Logical thinking. Okay, rational thinking. All right, so all these, you can say, all these shifts or all these modes, they started cropping up, especially during the 18th century. Okay, or in other words, the 1700s. So towards the beginning or mid, basically this was developing slowly and gradually. Writers such as Voltaire, writers such as Rousseau, and one more writer, you can see here his poster, Louis Sebastian Mercier. Okay, so all these thinkers, all these rationalists, they started printing essays, they started printing articles. So now, till now, we have seen that different kinds of literature was there on the go. Okay, and this is another sort of you can say tenet of, or you can say another sort of a mode that printing culture unleashed in the literary arena side, the non-fiction side, the critical side, the judgmental side. Okay, so critics, they were always they were having their logical viewpoint against the regressive, against the illogical, against the abstract qualities of thinking that were prevalent in that society, that European English society. So by the mid 18th century, many believed that books could change the world and liberate society from despotism, means from autonomous rule of people. Okay, some people who say that they have been appointed by God to rule them. So against that kind of irrational logic and tyranny. So there is this novel of Louis Sebastian Mercier, where that book is solely dedicated towards that towards the protagonist, that how he is reading the book and how he is getting transformed by the different revolutionary ideas that are enlisted in the book. And in that book, he gives this strong message towards the tyrant to go away. All right, there's this famous line, famous quote from that book, where he is advocating the tyrant to go away, so that logical reasoning could envelop the masses. Okay, the other kind of literature that was also on the go during this time was novels. There were fictional novels, there were non-fictional novels as well. Non-fictional arena of literature was more dedicated to these literatures, towards the critical essays. All right, novels in those times were majorly shifted towards the fictional side, where you had fictional characters. All right, and even when many famous women novels were there, like Jane Austen, like the Elliot sisters, all right, yeah, and the Bronte sisters, sorry, and George Eliot. So the Bronte sisters and Jane Austen and George Eliot, and many women writers who used to write while changing their name. Some of the women writers, some of the Bronte sisters and George Eliot, they used to write by via a pseudonym, means they used to give another name rather than their female name, because earlier, like I had told you, women were seen as submissive, as something to be creatures to be subjugated. All right, and their ideas, their opinions, even if they were rational or logical, they were looked down upon. All right, so it took a lot of efforts for women writers to come up in those times. All right. Now that you have seen that differing ideas were on the go, and they were clashing against the regressive ideas, so print culture was also very impactful, or it was also very helpful for the culmination of the French Revolution. All right, so many believe that print popularized the ideas of Enlightenment thinkers, critical ideas, logical ideas, ideas of liberty, equality, and fraternity that were the tenets of French Revolution. They were also advertised, made popular among the masses, all those illiterate people who could not study, who were not exposed to these this knowledge that books carried, that books held. Okay, they were now getting exposed to different ideas. They were getting exposed to different dialogues. All right, via the liberal thinking, via the critical thinking of these rationalists, of these thinkers. And also there was a certain type of literature that was dedicated to mocking the reality. These were the caricatures or the cartoons. Okay, like you can see here in this photo. That was also a factor where the rich people, okay, the upper caste people, they were criticized. Okay, upper caste people, they were criticized. How were they criticized? Via making caricatures or cartoons out of them. Okay. Why do some historians think that print culture created the basis for the French Revolution? So there are 3 points here. Firstly, and we have discussed this in the previous slide, that print culture enabled ideas of French Revolution to be popular among the masses. Ideas such as those of liberty, okay, equality, and fraternity, the basic tenets of the French Revolution. The print culture made it possible for these tenets to get popularized. Okay, then print culture enabled freedom of expression. All right, whatever viewpoints you hold, now you could easily express them via books. Okay, via, if not books, then essays, pamphlets, articles, journals. There were so many options. So there was a freedom of expression, or you can say rather there was an opportunity of expressing your idea. Okay, and the third was by criticizing. Means if you want to topple the autonomous government, you can express your views that are contrary to them, and you can criticize them. And how was print culture used as a criticizing tool? Via caricatures, via cartoons. Okay, so these are the different ways by which print culture created the basis for the French Revolution. Now, we will learn about children, women, and workers in the 19th century. So, the plight of women I have already discussed with you in one of the earlier slides, that women, they were subjected to conduct codes, and a certain kind of literature were being catered towards them. But with the advent of cheaper books and multiple books, okay, women were the, you can say very adept readers of novels. These were fictionalized books, like I had told you. Okay, so apart from the conduct books, women also indulged themselves into reading novels, which like I had mentioned, those women writers, they were very prone to express the side of the women of the 19th century, or not just of the 19th century, but also of the earlier times. All right, so writers such as Jane Austen, okay, George Eliot, okay, and the Bronte sisters. All right. So in 1812, the Grimm Brothers, this is related to children now. They published traditional folk tales. So they went around all over Germany, and they gathered traditional folk tales, and then they subjugated them into a collection of children literature. And children literature in that time was very well scrutinized. By this I mean that the kind of literature that was segregated into children literature and adult literature, that was that line or that segregation was very delicate. Means there were certain taboos that were there, and certain adult contents that were very strongly strongly shifted towards the adult side, and innocent ideas or moral ideas, basically, they were there enlisted in the children literature. Then London libraries, the concept of libraries that flourished in the 19th century. So when people were exposed more and more to literature, when they started getting educated, okay, then the concept of library, it also started, and that educated not just the white collar workers, means not just the upper class workers, but also the lower class, the middle class, the artisans as well. Okay, such example of the workers being educated can be seen in the penny magazines that was brought about in 1832 to 35. And this penny magazine, this not just taught women proper behavior and housekeeping, so somewhat like conduct code literature was also enlisted in those magazines, but these magazines were also very popular among the workers. All right, you can see here, this is the front piece of the penny magazine. Then, by the mid 19th century, Richard M. Hoe of New York. So, by and by, certain different, you can say, gradations or certain different improvements were incorporated into the printing press that Gutenberg had earlier invented. All right. So, some or the other metal pieces were added. First of all, then like you can see here in this picture, the whole of the press was, replaced by metallic parts. Okay, so this persona, Richard M. Hoe of New York, he perfected the power-driven cylindrical press, which was useful in printing presses. So towards the whole of, you can say, 19th century, all these experiments related to printing press, they were happening. And by the time we come towards the 20th century, we had the electrically driven or electrically operated printing press. Okay, electrically operated printing press. I'm abbreviating it here as PP. Okay. What impact do such advertisements have on the public mind? Does everyone react to printed material in the same way? So this is a very critical question, and because we have discussed this whole arena where enlightenment was on the go, this should help you think that not because there were certain thinkers, there were certain rationalists, or there were certain intellectuals that were expressing their ideologies. That does not mean that everyone was getting converted towards their ideology and rejecting whatever ideology those people held. That was not true. So what impact such advertisements have on the public mind? They do influence. They did influence the public mind to an extent, but that was always to an extent. Those people had their essence, their own integral idea that was there. So those people, for example, who were orthodox, okay, when they read about ideas of change, ideas of revolution by these critical thinkers, so of course they did not just go and envelop themselves into those critical ideas, into those rational ideas. No, because they had their orthodox mentality and they were living by those orthodox mentality. So that was not changed, or people were not, magically transformed from one kind of persona to another. Even if some people, they did shift their mentality and they became to a certain extent flexible, they still held their orthodox views. Okay, and on the contrary, if some people, they were flexible and they were exposed to orthodox literature, because not just one kind of literature was being produced. If there was critical and logical thinking, a kind of pamphlets that were on the go, so there were also those pamphlets that were dedicated to orthodox ideologies, right? So if those flexible people, if those people who had these flexible mentality ideologies, if they were exposed to these orthodox ideas, it does not mean that you can say their ideology got shifted towards a regressive side. No, maybe they didn't accept some of the points to be true, or maybe they just outrightly shunned all those ideologies away, and held their flexible side towards themselves. So no, this is a very clear no. Not everyone reacted to printed material in the same way. People were influenced, but that was always to an extent. And some people who may not completely agree with whatever was being said, or in those printed books, or not just books, but advertisements or pamphlets or posters or whatever, they could have easily shunned everything away. So this was all that you had to read in this part of the chapter, where the discussion of the printing culture in Europe comes to an end. In the later part of the chapter, we will be discussing about how this print culture it came into India. Now that we have discussed about the printing culture, the advent of the print culture in Europe, we have discussed its different implications and impacts and consequences. Now we'll be learning about India and the world of print. So here again, we'll be starting from ground zero. Means we'll be discussing about the times when printing press was not there, how people used to write in the absence of the printing press, then how the print culture it shaped the world of India. Okay. Now, India had a very old tradition of handwritten manuscripts, and these languages were not just restricted to a particular dialect, but it was varying in Sanskrit, Arabic, Persian, and other vernacular languages. And you can see here in this picture, these are pages from the Divan of Hafiz. So, Hafiz was a poet, and Divan was his collection of poems. Okay, and you can see it is not just this is a whole handwritten book, but they are not just words and they are not just writings, but rather they are very beautiful illustrations, okay, on the left hand side, and the boundary or the border of the page, they are also very beautiful, and so beautiful calligraphies are adorned in these books. Okay, so these handwritten manuscripts, of course, they were very built with craft, all right, written with craft. So they were not used in day-to-day life. So earlier modes of writing were on pieces of paper, of course, on palm leaves, okay, and they took a lot of effort to write, okay, and they were handled with care because they were very thin sheets of paper. This also applies to all those kind of writings that were there in other parts of the world as well before the advent of the wood blocks or any other sort of printing technique. Okay. Then again, how these it was also difficult to hold and transport them from one place to another because they were very thin, because they were very delicate. They had to be folded, or some of them they had to be sewn from the border so that they could be there in one intact form. All right. So it was very difficult for these printed pages, handwritten pages to be transported, and because very fewer people engaged in this literary activity, so these were not used in daily life. Okay. But when print came to India via Portuguese missionaries, and the first place where printing press came to India is Goa. You can see here, this is an example of the older technique of the printing press. Okay, it first came to Goa in the mid 16th century. So printing press was there on the go in Europe in the mid 15th century, in the 1450s, right? But printing press came to India a century later. So you can imagine that towards the western side of the world, already a lot of printing revolution was on the go. Everything was shifting, everything was taking place, books were being published on a wide scale. A century later, printing press came to India, to Goa, via these Portuguese missionaries. And for first place, since Goa is towards the southern part of India, so the first place where books were published, or books were, you can say, printed, okay, they were of course towards the southern side. So the Catholic priests, they printed the first Tamil book in 1579 at Cochin, and the first Malayalam book in 1730. All right. So earlier books that were printed, that were in varying languages, Bengal, Marathi, mostly they were towards the southern part of the India. And now you know why, because the first printing press was established in Goa towards the southern part. So it was in Tamil, in Malayalam, and in other parts of Karnataka, like the Konar and Kinnar area, that these printing presses were available. Okay. From 1780, James Augustus Hickey began to edit the Bengal Gazette, but was persecuted by Warren Hastings. So, when the East India Company came about in 1760, there were certain Englishmen as well who were opposing to the way the upper you can say class Englishmen, they were propagating their rule in India. All right. So, of course, if I am going to rule over a few people, okay, and if I don't, you can say I have a few friends, and I come to, say for example, this is just an example. If I come to your place and I say that I want to play, but I've also brought 2-3 friends along with me, and the kind of game that I want to play, the kind of play that, suppose I want to play Ludo, and you want to play cricket, all right, and I am imposing that no, all of you will be allowed to play Ludo, nobody will be allowed to play cricket. Okay, so the friends that I have brought with me, they could also be criticizing me, right? that you have come in other in other people's area, so you should at least pay some heed to how you are managing things. You cannot be overrightly dominant, or you cannot be overrightly submissive of what they have to say. At least listen to them. All right. So this was what was happening there. That when in the 1760s, when the East India Company came to India, there were certain Englishmen that were stationed in India, that were critical of the way the Englishmen, they were propagating their rule in India. All right. One of them was James Augustus Hickey, and he was the first person to he was the first person to initiate writings in English. All right, in the Bengal Gazette. So till now, we have learned that printing press had came to Goa for the first time in the mid 16th century. Okay, and printings were there in different Indian languages, especially towards the south hand side. So Tamil, Malayalam, okay, and all those languages. All right, but English had not been written until 1780, when James Augustus Hickey, he firstly started to write his viewpoints in English in the Bengal Gazette, like you can see here in this picture. Okay, and in this Gazette, in this piece of article, newspaper, all right, he was somewhere or the other criticizing the way the upper Englishmen were propagating their rules in India. So he was critical of their ways, and he was making a gossip or making a mockery of their ways. So that is why he was persecuted by Warren Hastings later. And later some other people came about, and they started to ensure that English was the medium in which newspapers are being printed. So Gangadhar Bhattacharya, he brought out the weekly Bengal Gazette. Okay. Then, like we had studied in the European part, where printing culture, it created a wave of various varying arguments, though that same phrase that I have been writing, right? Varying arguments, and a wave of critical, logical thinking, different thinking basically, or you can say a kind of ideology that was opposing to the prevalent one. So a certain debate came up, a certain contestation of idea, okay, a certain contestation of idea, where some people will hold on to their version, and others will say that no, your ideas are regressive, or they are too modernized for our Indian traditional ideas, right? So this was not just limited to the social area, that means how the classes were being divided, okay, but this was also there in the religious side, the same way that we have seen in the European side about the Catholic Reformation, right? That's the religious side. So here also in India, we'll be seeing about the various religious reforms that were happening owing to the print culture. Okay, means the different shifts in Hinduism that was happening, because the lower caste Hindus, they were always being shunned away from the society, right? And in the social area, where again the casteism can also be incorporated into the social area. Then again, the plight of women, okay, that in India the plight of women was regressive, somewhere or the other more aggressive than that was there in Europe, because in India the practice of sati was there, or if you were a widow you could not remarry, or the habit, or not the habit, you can say the ritual of child marriage. All right, so all these ideas, they were being contested, all these ideas, they were being reformed, they were being questioned, okay, and so that is why we say that this was a time of controversy between reformers and religious orthodoxy. And there were certain writers such as Ram Mohan Roy and others that we were learning about. They were writing their own viewpoints, and if they were too revolutionary, okay, then they were being prohibited. Okay, the Hindu Orthodoxy commissioned the Samachar Chandrika to oppose Ram Mohan Roy's Sambat Kamodi. So Ram Mohan Roy was always for the upliftment of women, for the upliftment of the lower caste people, the workers who were poor. Okay, and because he was writing for them in his newspaper, then that was being contested by the Hindu Orthodoxy system, Hindu Orthodoxy Samachar Chandrika. Okay. Then, since India is a secular country, so we just do not have the religious reform that is related to Hinduism, but we also have religious reforms related to Islam. Okay, so the Deoband Seminary published fatwas telling Muslim readers how to conduct themselves and explaining the means of Islamic doctrines. So, with the advent of print culture, and this I have been repeating, but I'll be repeating to you here again, that various contestations of idea were on the go. Okay, so if one sect of the society did not agree with what the other sect had to say, they used to engage in debates. And what kind of debates? Written debates. Okay, and since that mode of debate, that mode of contestation was in a written area, or you can say in a printed manner, okay, then those people were not just contesting again, or they were not just arguing against that one particular person, rather they were spreading their ideology to local masses as well. So if I say I'm a follower of Doctrine A, and if you are a follower of Doctrine B, and if I have written something on Doctrine A, and if you have written something on Doctrine B, okay, then there are other people who will be reading my doctrine, and there are other people who will be reading your doctrine. Okay, so some people may get influenced by my idea, some people may get influenced by your idea, and if these contestations, if this clash, if this conflict becomes so heated, becomes so massive, then there may be a time where a certain sect or a certain, you can say, division may crop up. Okay, this was what was happening in not just Hinduism, some way or the other, that was related to the casteism also. And since casteism comes under both the social arena, so that we'll be figuring out later. But here we have the example of Islam. Okay, so that was what was happening in Islam at that time. Different sects, different divisions, they were cropping up, and those different sects and divisions, they were issuing fatwas, those written documents, religious conduct codes that were relaying to those Muslim leaders that this is how you should behave, this is how women should behave, and they were not just afraid of people, harboring to certain different religious doctrine. Okay, but they were also afraid of the women, that if women were more exposed to literature, then they will be also equipped to question their ideologies. Okay, the same thing that was basically happening in Hinduism as well, because in both these religions, women, they were considered as to be, serving the patriarchal needs, serving the patriarchal ideologies. So if women become equipped with education, with power, with their power of expressing their ideologies, then they would be questioning our ideas, that why do we repress them, why do we subjugate them. Okay, so all of these clashes were on the go. All right. Then Naval Kishore Press, this is a press that was based in Lucknow, and Sri Venkateshwar Press was based in Mumbai, or earlier it was known as Bombay. So Bombay, they published religious texts in vernaculars from 1850s, and Tulsidas's Ramacharitra was printed in Calcutta in 1810. There were also some Persian newspapers that were printed in 1822. All right, and so basically you can say that the mid 1800s, that was very dedicated, devoted towards the print of religious texts. All right, towards the print of religious texts. Okay, and the examples are here. You can see these presses, they were dedicated to publishing religious texts in vernaculars in the local languages, and the example is Tulsidas's Ramacharitra. All right. Then a new form of visual culture was also on the go towards the end of the 1800s. All right. Towards the end of the 1800s, there were two things that was happening. Visual culture was being formed, and what I mean by visual culture is paintings, all right, illustrations. So basically all those ideas that we have already seen was enveloping Europe. So all of these are happening late in India, but this is how they're happening, all right. So cheap prints and calendars would be bought by the poor to decorate the walls of the homes. Those almanacs, if you may remember, and painters such as Raja Ravi Verma, they produce paintings for mass circulation. So you can see here, this is also an example of a painting. And cheap prints and calendars, why they were being, you can say, printed. You can guess, I think by now, they were being printed so that different ideologies could be circulated, and they were printed so that, of course, those people could get a chance to earn. And they were printed, cheap prints were done so that they could be sold out in lesser amount of money. People could buy them, and then that was basically how more and more people, not just of the richer side but also of the lower class people and also women, they were also getting exposed to books, and ultimately they were also getting exposed to literature. Okay. Then by the 1870s, various caricatures and cartoons were being published. About the caricatures and cartoons, we have already learned that how they were used to mock the European government, the European royalty, okay, or the aristocrats. This was also being done in India. All right, and it was by the 1870s that caricatures and cartoons were being published in journals, newspapers, and they were done to comment on the social and political issues. So you can see here in this picture, there is this British figure, and he's just at the center. All right, and there are other Indians at the sides, and he is either listening to them or guiding them. Okay, but this is how things are supposed to work. So these caricatures, these cartoons, they were also tools by which you could criticize the government. All right. They were also tools by which you could criticize the government, by which you could mock the government. All right. So all of these we have already, we have already discussed when we were discussing these advents of different modes of printing in the European side, in the English side. But this is how it was happening in India as well. And as you, if you may remember, that by the 1870s, the nationalist idea was also started to form, right? The idea of a separate national identity. So these caricatures and these cartoons, which criticize the government, which mock the government, these helped in inculcating a national feeling for oneself, and this helped in questioning the authority of the British government. So furthermore, we'll be learning about the plight of women and how the printing culture, it kind of revolutionized the idea of socialist stances, that you can say about the casteist stance and about the patriarchal stance that women were subjected to. Okay.